나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for liking, subscribing, sharing. We're almost to that point where once we reach 1,000 subscribers, YouTube will hopefully will get there in time that YouTube's algorithms will help to make available, I don't know how to say it, the algorithms will, when somebody is looking for information on Buddhism and so forth, notch up the availability, the seeability of our Sangha to more people. And that's very exciting. So I encourage you to please subscribe. Other than that, patrons, people who support on patreon.com/TLK or to paypal.me/SifuSylvain. You guys help me tread water trying to stay ahead of the costs and all of that of doing this. But we are continuing today with the opening of the Eyes Gosho, a lengthy one, but one that's very, very, very foundational to Nichiren Buddhism, Nichiren's doctrine of Lotus Sutra Buddhism. Catch myself too. In fact, if you're just starting out, a really good place to start. If you know somebody who's just starting out, has all these questions about what is Nichiren, why not just Buddha? Well, one of the things, and we're going to dive into this further today, about this word Buddha that we use, yeah? So most of the world, even people who call themselves Buddhists, think of Buddha as a person, a human. Yeah, a historical person. And even books and references to Buddha will talk about the historical Buddha, right? But I think this is very confusing, especially to somebody who's just starting out in trying to learn about what is this thing, Buddhism. And so Nichiren is going to dive into this here, and in not so many words, what I want to start this discussion about is, let's define what Buddha is. And I have, if you look in the search of this channel, not YouTube, but this channel, there's a separate search on the home page, in the middle of the page, right off to one side, where the playlist, videos, about, and then there's a little magnifying glass, that search. And you search for what is Buddha. You'll come up with a subset, because I have talked about this many times over the years. Buddha is a label we give to identify a certain consciousness, a certain knowing that is profound and unparameterized by time-space. Time-space parameterized by the entirety of the universe. So Buddha is a consciousness not just of the local self, idea of self, other, earth, solar system, but an idea of timeless understanding of the entire process that is life, the universe as the engine of life. That seeing that in everything that we experience is a very, it may sound like just words, but the actualization of that consciousness is quite a paradigm shift. It changes your identification from being something to being of and instantiating moment to moment the act of being, living as all things are. Because nothing is static. Nothing just sits here. Everything is in momentum, the kinetics of energy, yeah? And so, much like we identify well, we have no problem identifying somebody as, I don't know why this is my example, but crazy, right? Are they the embodiment of crazy? Or do we label them crazy because of a whole slew of particular actions? Yeah? So, terrible analogy, but Buddha is that kind of a label. It's a label for a certain kind of mind, consciousness. Follow? Siddhartha Gautama, human, man. When he, after 6 or 7 years of trying every scholarship he could on finding this core idea of liberating ourselves from our anxieties and stress and so forth, with all these great Brahmins, teachers, wasn't able to get there, got frustrated and went off on his own. Spent 6 more years, right? The story, walking around this tree. 12 years of intense monologue, really, with his own mind. How do I understand what's actually happening in the universe? He gets this huge revelation after a lot of small revelations, right? And he puts it together. And he attains this consciousness, this mind of Buddha-ness. People actually, he, in a way, shed his identification as a human, Siddhartha, Prince Siddhartha, son of Suddhodana, his earthly lineage. His enlightenment was so all-encompassing that he became known as, new label, Shakyamuni, which basically means Shakya, the family from which this human came, has become Muni, a great sage, still a human, right? But Shakyamuni labels him as the great teacher. The great teacher of what? The great, respectable, amazing human being. Why? Because he's attained something we've never known before. This mindset, this consciousness called Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha. He is not Buddha. He is the embodiment of that consciousness. Do you see? Siddhartha didn't contain Buddha. He opened his mind to channel Buddha. It's important to understand this because his 50 years worth of teaching and the practice that we have learned from Shakyamuni, the method for which he attained this Buddha, is the method he's teaching us how to do for you, for me, for ourselves, to do exactly as he did. Mimic me. Understand, develop your mind, and then actualize Buddha through your mind. It's already there. That consciousness, it's already there. You don't have to create it. You simply need to awaken the rest of your consciousnesses to the fact that it's already there. It's inherent in the entire universe since time without beginning or end. That is Buddha. And he's in the process, as Nichiren is taking us through it here in the Lotus Sutra, of saying exactly that. But, you know, people never heard this before. Or I should say, even after 40-some years of Shakyamuni's teachings, still don't get it. A few here and there may have, but generally speaking, all of his followers and students, even the most senior, they're still like, what are you saying? You are Buddha, right? It's not just you starting out thinking Buddha's a guy. His own students, after 40 years of learning and teaching from him, still identify him as the Buddha. And Nichiren, you know, he adopts that rhetoric because he knows that's what people believe, and if they're not ready to get it, then by forcing it on them, they're likely to just walk away like with broken brains, right? They won't want to hear it. Which is why we talk about the right time, the right capacity. Sometimes people just aren't ready to hear perceptive truths. It's unfortunate, but that's the human samsaric identity, yeah? So here he goes. He's going to start talking about the duration of the life of the Tathagata, which is the portion of the Lotus Sutra, the 16th chapter, to identify it specifically, where Shakyamuni finally says what should be obvious, what nails exactly what his disciples are not quite getting. So here we go. Thereafter, preaching the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha declared, quote, "All the gods, men, and Ashura demons believe that this Shakyamuni Buddha was the one who had left the palace of the Shakya clan, Shakya, and sat in meditation under the Bodhi tree not far from the town of Gaya and attained perfect enlightenment." Shakya. And Muni really comes from his teaching, so it doesn't come from his realization, although that's part of it, right? You can't teach what you don't know, although some try. And so he restates what everyone, yup. This declaration in the Lotus Sutra represents what all the great bodhisattvas had in mind while listening to the sutras from the flower garland at the Hall of Enlightenment to the 14th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. The entire history of Shakyamuni's teachings for over 40 years, even the beginning of the Lotus Sutra, this is what all the students had in mind. This guy used to be a prince, left the Shakya clan, sat under a tree, and boom, transformed into Buddha. Right? Peaceful practices to speak the truth, good men. Wait a minute. Of enlightenment to the 14th chapter of Lotus. Peaceful practices to speak the truth, good men, quote unquote, continued the Buddha, continued Shakyamuni Buddha, it has been countless eons, numerous hundreds, 10,000, 100 millions, Nayuta of kalpas. Today we would say, what is it, 13.86 billion years ago, right? The Big Bang. Since I obtained Buddhahood. So this translation, and I don't know that Shakyamuni said it this particular way, but what he's talking about is that this Buddha thing that I attained, I didn't manufacture it. I didn't grow another organ called Buddha. What I did was awaken to the reality of Buddha, which has its roots not in my life. It's not me that's Buddha. It's an enlightenment of consciousness that I attained, which has been here since time without beginning. Since the Big Bang. And if you know something about the Big Bang, you know that the Big Bang isn't what started the universe. It is after the beginning of the expansion, the great expansion, which is what we call the Big Bang. But I don't want to get technical. I just want to illustrate that this goes back to time without beginning. The first instantiation, the first expression of energy that in nanoseconds burst into a flurry of potential, manifesting this huge ball of heat, pressure, energy, manifesting. We are still some of the reactions manifesting of that explosion, if you will, of what? Of life. What we call life. The universe doesn't call it anything. It's just doing what it's doing. We, with a consciousness that can observe the process, call it life. But that's a very unique thing, that mind. It doesn't occur everywhere. It occurs as an emergent property of this apparatus, born of billions of energetic combinations, reactions, instantiations, manifestations, and expressed in each our particular way, with all of that momentum moving through time space. Whether we call this particular group of manifestations Paul or Edna or Matsui or whatever we label it, that is what we seize upon as an identity, because it's the first thing the mind becomes conscious of. Wow, look at all this stuff. Look at the face of a baby. Look at how much of the day it spends just darting around, trying to qualify, identify, categorize. Right? A lot of time this mind is being developed with this idea of identification. And at some point, how do I fit in here? What am I? Let me taste it. What? As many senses as I can throw at stuff. Let me figure it out. Right? I've talked about this before. Throw everything in your mouth, because much more taste, feel, scent, all the senses we can bring to bear to qualify things. Well, from that activity becomes a tremendous force of attachment to things, because that's how we identify self. And so Shakyamuni, Siddhartha, figured out with no small effort, if we could just shed the idea that we are simply a construct of things, and see that that construct of things all the way out to the universe, it's all the same thing. It's all the same energy. It's all the same movement, that huge machine of time-space. Wow. The specificity we put on self is the very thing that causes us stress and anxiety. Because what are we stressed and anxious about all the time? Either gaining something or losing something, collecting things, status. They're all different versions of possessions, even in relationships, yeah? If we could just lose that idea that we can possess, lose, own, and just be with, what a different experience life would be. It's really that simple. Simple. When you chant in front of your Butsudan, you focus on that Myoho characters in the treasure tower, your mandala. You open in your mind that potential which is unattached, which is just simply being, life itself. Buddha. That's it. That's the whole game. And the minute you walk away from your Butsudan, attachments start flooding in, don't they? Where are my shoes? Right? It's just, that's samsara. But even then, if we continuously open Buddha in our minds, even then, the search for shoes to walk on whatever example, our possessions become less imbued with, what shall we say, importance, critical need. Our cravings, they start to die away, and we start to observe and experience all the same stuff, but with a different urgency, a different need. And that elevates our life condition. We start to live more and more with Buddha in our minds. And this is what we talk about being a bodhisattva, coursing through life, through the universe, at however million miles an hour we're all flying through here. Right? Less stress, less anxiety, more Buddha. We're shifting the balance. And when we do that, the things that normally would create great stress for us, even if we're in the middle of it, will reduce. And we want to minimize that, because the more we minimize it, the more the glorious, amazing opportunity that this life just falls at our feet, just showing us, becomes more and more amazing. There are moments when I just sit in the yard here and look out at the land, and I want to just weep at how it's incredible. This whole universe of expression of potential. It's too big a eat, as an old commercial used to say. You'd have to be old enough to get that one. Thus, with one stroke, Nichiren says, he denied as untrue all his previous statements, such as obtaining the first enlightenment, quote unquote. Not true. said 3 times in the Flower Garland Sutra. Because the Flower Garland Sutra, he was talking to people who couldn't possibly understand this shift of perspective, of perception. Yeah. An experience completely foreign to them. So he spoke in language that was still attached to stuffness, but albeit a new perspective. The first enlightenment in the Agama Sutras, how he spoke about his arrival at Buddha. The first meditation under the Bodhi tree in the Vimalakirti Sutra, 16 years after the first enlightenment in the Sutra of the Great Assembly. I once sat in meditation at the place of the practice in Buddha Gaya in the Great Sun Buddha Sutra for 29 years since his enlightenment in the Sutra of the Benevolent Kings. I once meditated under the Bodhi tree in the place of enlightenment for 6 years, stated in the Sutra of Infinite Meaning, the very introduction to the Lotus Sutra. And at first I sat at the place of enlightenment, gazed on the tree, and walked around it meditating, quote unquote, in the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Expedience. This is a critical point. This forms one of the very basis of Nichiren's doctrine. He's pointing at Shakyamuni's own words, and he's saying, don't you understand? What a revelation, what a shift in his teaching Shakyamuni made in the Lotus Sutra. He completely, in a sense, invalidated everything he'd taught before. He was now saying, you need to understand. It was like, do you remember the day when you were in school learning math? And the teacher said, okay, you remember when you were younger and you learned that when you add fractions together, you cancel this out and this out and that out, and then you figure out the rest? And he taught you that cancel is a trick. It's not real. That then he showed you, and this is before you get into algebra or in early algebra, shows you that cancellation is a silly trick. Let me show you what's actually happening here. That you're multiplying by 1 over 1, or this is 1, and therefore 1 just repeats itself. You don't need it in the equation. Means extremes, that theorem. You remember that? Perhaps not. But perhaps you get the analogy. There are times as we're learning things that there are tricks that we're taught and we take them as read. Oh, this is what we do and this is what we call it. Until one day, your perception or your teaching demonstrates what that has hidden from you all along. That thing that you thought was a rule or a law was actually not that at all. It's just that there was a complicated depth of thinking there that would have served to confuse you at one point. But now that you understand the process better, we can delve into what's actually happening when you do that little trick. Oh, and now that launches a much deeper understanding of what it is to work with fractions or whatever it is, inventory, payroll, whatever you're into. And I don't know, whatever it is where you run into those moments, no matter where they are in life, even in relationships, we catch ourselves in certain behaviors that when we transcend those behaviors and understand what's really going on, it's always kind of jarring, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, I held that perception for so long. Am I stupid? Are you lying to me? And this can be a conversation with somebody else or yourself the most jarring, yeah? So this is what Nichiren is saying. He says, after 40-some years of teaching, Shakyamuni starts to teach this, and in the 16th chapter, wham! And after all that time, people are like, what? Right? This is why they're asking stupid questions like, how are you old enough to have taught all these historical people? Because it's not me. It's Buddha. Something that's always existed. I didn't, but you're Buddha. I don't get, what? People, it's hard to let go of those illusions, those ways of thinking, right? It's tough. What Shakyamuni called habit energy. The longer the habit lasts, the more momentum it has. Kinetics, things that are in motions tend to stay in motion. Right? And there's a bit of a squealing brakes kind of thing that happens when this new information comes out. So this is why when we practice, what the words that I use to ease that transition is that we influence, right? Something can have great inertia, but you can modify it. You can direct it. You can change its momentum, even if that's just directionally. Maintain the momentum, but move in this direction. This is what daily practice does. We awaken Buddha, and then as we course through our day, we influence our actions, our being in the day, as much as we can with that Buddha. And by doing that, our environment is our mirror, right? So the environment will sense that shift and will be influenced by that shift. Lest we forget, which is why we practice daily. Because it's really easy to fall right back into kinetics and just karma. Big freight train. Yeah? So this is, Nichiren's talking about this. He's saying, do you realize in all these previous teachings, the verbiage, the way Buddha taught, the way Buddhism was taught, had this constant kind of not quite right expression of the mission, the goal of this methodology that Shakyamuni was teaching. And now in the Lotus Sutra, he's dropping all reference to the way people think, his students, and he's saying, okay, I've taught this long enough now. You students, you know enough about what I'm doing that I'm dropping the pretense of teaching to what you are comfortable hearing, and I'm going to give you the truth. It's time to shift gears. It's time to do this. You do this. This is how I did it. That's the big shift in the Lotus Sutra, right? And this is what the 16th chapter is saying. You guys think, and you've been hearing me talk about Buddhism like it's something that I alone achieved, but you haven't been hearing me correctly. I haven't even expressed, even though all of the other teachings that I've given you are tools for you to do what I'm doing, you still haven't made that shift. So now, no more baloney, no more nice guy, no more playing it easy. Now it's time for you to do this. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Do it. Buddha's always been here all along. Those of you who haven't gotten that yet, let me make it explicit. And that's what the essential teaching, the latter half of the Lotus Sutra, is all about. Thus it was revealed that Shakyamuni had been the Buddha long since the eternal past, and it became clear that various Buddhas, all the Buddhas he had talked about before the Lotus Sutra, they were all manifestations of Shakyamuni Buddha. It's confusing because they're not manifestations of Siddharthas. They're not Shakyamuni making these eternal Buddhas. No, they're Shakyamuni's, the great sage from the Shakya clan, describing Buddha-ness in various ways, in various minds, as all being, as he says in this chapter, the same thing, Buddha. There are no differences. It's hard for people to get that. To this day, it's hard for people to get that. To this day, there are thousands and thousands of Chinese chanting Amida Buddha. They don't understand. They missed it. They're trying to personalize their own enlightenment. No, it's yours. It's Buddha is everywhere, all the time, since time without beginning. Chloe. I'm trying to break her of that habit, but she's got a serious problem with her nose, and so I apologize for the noise. I thought she was over it, but not yet. Sorry, distractions. So yeah. In the pre-Lotus Sutra, as well as the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra, various Buddhas and Shakyamuni Buddha were on the same level. In other words, they weren't all competing for the same prize. They were perceived as just other embodiments of Buddhas. There's a Shakyamuni Buddha, and there's that guy over there called Amida Buddha, and there's that guy. Do you see? And what Shakyamuni is trying to say is, no. There aren't all these different guys who've attained Buddhahood. Buddha's Buddha. There is only one Buddha. It is the one universe we are in. The only separation is the individuations of karma that we all present. But we can open our mind's perception and experience Buddha, the one, the thus come one. It's in the name, Tathagata. Each practiced Buddhism on their own. That's how it used to be. Therefore, those who considered various Buddhas to be their most venerable one did not follow Shakyamuni. Now, however, as Shakyamuni proved to be the eternal Buddha, that Buddha is an eternal thing, those Buddhas on the lotus petals in the Flower Garland Sutra, or the Buddhas in the Hodo Sutras, the Wisdom and the Great Sun Buddhas, all became attendants of Shakyamuni Buddha. In other words, just various expressions of this great teacher, of Buddha. Not the Buddha, of Buddha, of Buddha-ness. This is very, very, very important to understand what Buddha is. If you understand that Buddha is the universal engine of life that is the universe, then labeling it with different names is nonsense. And practicing those different names is nonsense. When we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, we're not chanting Shakyamuni Buddha. Right? We're chanting, Buddha now, Buddha me. Let me instantiate my consciousness of Buddha. Not let me, that's like asking, language. It is now, it is time, it is with this next chant that I instantiate, that I manifest Buddha. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. That's why the Namu. I apologize, it's not a let me. I was just trying to come up with an exhortation to identify this moment of Buddha-ness. Namu. It's not even an I am ready for, because I is an identification, yeah? Namu, the preparedness for this moment, this next moment, moment to moment, moment, manifest, instantiate, Buddha, consciousness. That's the method, that's the practice. Obtaining enlightenment at the age of 30, Shakyamuni Buddha took charge of this Saha world, which had been domains of the kings of the Brahma heaven, the king of the devils, the sixth heavens, the others. What does that mean? In other words, Siddhartha used to course through life influenced by all of these various influences. The 10 realms are influences. The 3,000 realms are potentials influencing. Will you be the victim, the end result of all these influences? Or will you flip the script and become aware of all potential and choose your experience? That's the best visual I can come up with enlightenment. But now the Buddha reversed what had been said in the pre-Lotus Sutra and in the theoretical section of the Lotus Sutra, that this world is the defiled land, whereas other worlds in the universe are pure lands. Oh, that's what the Pure Land is about. It's a shift of experience, of perception. He now declared that this world is the land of the original Buddha, and what had been said to the pure lands, to be pure lands throughout the universe, were defiled lands of manifestations. I'm going to pause here because this is the meat of our practice, folks. If any of that left you wondering, then listen to it again. Read it for yourself. Translations being what they are, the meaning still comes through. Right? What commandeers our life as humans is our attachments, our obsessions to own, to collect, to have, to not lose. Because everything is a reflection, somehow identifying this self. You don't need to lose yourself. This isn't immolation practice. This isn't annihilating the body. This is a realization of what's actually going on. No denials, no burning, no annihilation, no immolation. It's a conscious evolution of the actual process like learning that cancellation in fractions is just a handy device that we've been using, but it doesn't reflect what's actually happening. And when you do understand that everything is simply expressing constantly this potential, the myriad, uncountable potentials, first of all, the idea of hanging on to anything becomes ridiculous. So the idea of possession and loss, that's not a concern anymore. I mean, just imagine that alone. What is that like? It might seem that just that perception alone would be a loss, but it isn't. What you're gaining is that there is no loss. So it's a gain. But then at some point, the gain becomes kind of funny because it's all there for everyone all the time. Time being a moving target. Oh yeah, we keep forgetting we're moving. It's kind of like we live life like the dog in the car that doesn't understand motion. And as soon as he gets close enough to home, just leaps from the car like he's going to run through the front yard and go in the house. And then you hear, beep, right? Because the dog suddenly confronts gravity, speed, smacking. Hopefully he doesn't get too injured. But from that point on, even the dog knows, oh yeah, jumping out of here is a good idea. Well, some dogs anyway. Dog gonna dog, right? But you see, it's kind of like that. It's a huge paradigm shift. Oh, something's going on I hadn't ever considered. Yeah. So home's still there, the road's still there, the car's still moving, but the dog learns to wait until the door is open, looks at the ground. Okay, it's not moving. I can get on the ground, walks away from the car, he goes, I'm safe, and then runs to the house, right? Until he gets used to it. This is what we're doing with our practice. We're chanting an awakening Buddha, and it rattles us for a good long time as we practice. Then we get into the habit of it. Wow, okay, yeah, but this is normal. Well, it hasn't always been normal, but we get accustomed to it real fast. And sometimes we walk away from it, and then we start to smack our heads on the road again, go, oh yeah, I know what to do about this. Right? Once you open the door, go Hanzon, and you walk through it, Buddha, it's always there. It's always been there, but now you know it. Now you realize it. So now you start to work with it. That's when the practice becomes really amazing. Now you apply yourself to it. Pretty soon you become somebody who's just looking around, okay. Things happen and you go, You start to recognize how life moves. You start to identify where it tends to go awry. And so I think I can decide before that happens not to do that. I can shift. And boy, when you shift, whether you take it to Gohonzon and you chant in your throes of equilibrium, Buddha me, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha now. I don't understand why this is happening. Bring fear, bring avarice, bring hate. Whatever it is you're dealing with, bring that energy to your Butsudan and Buddha. It will penetrate without your mind having to do any of it, without your monkey mind trying to seize and hang on to ideas and fix and arrange, because that mind is your samsaric mind. It don't work. Just use that mind as perceiver and let your Buddha truth arrange the dominoes. Things will get easier. certain situations simply won't arise anymore. New opportunities will just blast right into your face. And how did this come up? But forget how. This is great. Be in it. Buddha. That's the only reason to do this. If you're not prepared for that kind of revolution, why are you wasting your time? Namo Myo Renge Kyo. I want you all to feel that revolution. And I know that if you've done it at all, you've felt it. The only thing we do by studying is raise our confidence. Right? It's one thing we humans do really well. We want. Yeah? We're big want machines. So shift your want to enlightenment and see if that doesn't produce more than you ever could imagine. Want Buddha. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thanks for being here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Share if that works for you. Listen to the audio podcast. Use these resources, please. The bookstore, the mandala store, the Gohanzon store, whatever you want to call it. Right? Keep your practice strong. Please be careful with your health. I respect you deeply for your practice. Those of you who can, Patreon, right? Or PayPal. Let's expand this Sangha. Let's change the world. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Be healthy. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.